I ran out of gas. I had gone out to lunch with my dad, and my gas gauge was broken. I've never been good at math and miscalculated how much gas I had left. Instead of stopping near where my dad works, I decided to wait until I got back to my town where it's cheaper. Big mistake. About 10 miles later on the highway, my car comes to halt. I pull over and call AAA to bring me gas. While I'm waiting for AAA, a man in a truck pulls up behind me. He asked what happened. I explain I'm out of gas. He offers to get me some so I don't have to wait for AAA. I say thank you. That would be awesome. He then tells me I need to come with him to get the gas. I ask why. He says I shouldn't be on the side of the road all alone. He says come on, just get in. He won't bite, and he won't get the gas unless I can trust him. Well, another motorist must have saw me stranded and called the police to help me. I see the police car pulling up, and so does this man. He literally peels out as fast as possible away from the scene once he sees the police officer. Nothing happened to me, but I can't help but look back on that event and wonder what he would have done if I had gotten in his truck. Almost ran out of gas in Oregon. This is one of my favorite personal stories since everything turned out all right. But I still get chills thinking about how many different ways the night could have gone wrong. A few years ago, my friend Jane and I took a trip to Portland, Oregon. We're both from the south side of Chicago, and Jane was feeling pretty jaded with the city. She was convinced everything was better on the West Coast, including the people, so we flew out to Portland and rented a car, which we named Veronica. The day before we were supposed to fly back home, we took Veronica and drove up to Aberdeen, Washington to see Kurt Cobain's childhood home. After that, we drove down the coast, sightseeing along the way. We visited Astoria, Oregon to see the house from the Goonies and ended the day at Cannon Beach to check out Haystack Rock. All in all, it was a pretty nice day. Once it started to get dark, we decided to head back to our hotel, which is just under 2 hours away. I knew that I needed gas, so I told Jane I would stop at the first gas station I see. Cannon Beach is a small resort-type town. A lot of little shops and restaurants, but I didn't see any gas stations. Being from the city, I'm used to seeing two on every corner. So, I wasn't really worried. I expected to find one soon. I am completely unfamiliar with the area, so I just keep following the GPS instructions while talking to Jane. Next thing I know, we're not in any type of town. We're on a dark winding road surrounded by trees. At this point, I'm getting a little worried. I pull over to the side of the road to use the GPS to search for the nearest gas station. It tells me there's one about a mile down the road. Awesome. I'll get some gas and we'll be set. So, I'm driving and Veronica tells us that we arrived at our destination. I pull into a completely dark and empty gas station. We're still surrounded by woods and darkness. As far as I can tell, there's nothing around for miles. According to Veronica, we have about 10 miles worth of gas and the nearest gas station is 30 miles away. Jane and I are sitting there trying to figure out what to do when another car pulls in. I keep going about my business and don't really pay attention to the other car. I just assume they need gas too. Out of the corner of my eye, I see someone gesturing to me. After some hesitation, I crack the window to see what they want. There's a middle-aged man and his wife in the car. He starts asking us all kinds of questions. Need to fill up? Coming from the beach? Driving back to Portland? I keep my answers polite but short. Then, he tells us that he actually owns the gas station we're at but doesn't make enough money to keep it open that late. He tells us that he knows of a Chevron about 3 miles away and gives us directions for it. He gave us his number and says to give him a call in case we don't make it to the Chevron. My name is Sam the Mechanic Man. Let me know if you don't make it and I'll come rescue you ladies. We thank him profusely and head out. Jane is going on and on how nice that was and how that never would have happened in Chicago. I agreed. That was very nice, if odd, of him. Strange that he happened to be driving past his gas station at the same time we pulled in, but whatever. I make a joke about him calling his buddy at the gas station saying, "I'm sending 2 women your way." We make it to the Chevron and this kid, 18 or 19 years old, comes out to pump our gas. He asks us how we're doing, then says, "There's a lot of weirdos out here tonight." Jane and I look at each other and I let out a small laugh and say, "Ha! I told you." I turn back to the kid and ask him what he means. He tells me this story, how his brother owes some drug dealer a ton of money and how he's hiding somewhere nearby. He's planning on kicking the shit of him once he gets off his shift. I can tell Jane is getting uncomfortable with the building weirdness of the night, so I give the kid a good tip, wish him luck, and start driving again. At one point during our conversation, Jane calls Sam the mechanic man and leaves him a voicemail. She tells him we made it to the gas station and how much we appreciate his help. I thought the call was unnecessary. It is what it is. A few minutes later, we're on the highway and about 10 minutes from our hotel. Jane's phone rings and it's Sam. Again, she thanks him profusely. He asks her where we're from and when we're flying home. He tells her his name is Sam Glesty and he wrote a book called Wrongly Accused. We should read it when on our plane ride home. This piqued my interest. "Jane, you have to look up that book to see what it's about." She Googles it. Then, she goes limp and she looks like she's going to puke. "What is it?" "He was accused of being the Green River Killer." Immediately she starts freaking out. "He has my number now." Back at the hotel, we do some more digging. Apparently, a victim of the Green River serial killer picked Sam out of a lineup. However, the real killer was caught and convicted based on DNA evidence. But around the same time in the 70s, Sam was convicted and served time for abducting and assaulting a young woman in the area we were in. The book he wrote was about all of that. We ended up stuck in Portland for 2 more days due to a snowstorm in Chicago. It was a weird, tension-filled 2 days. Considering the circumstances and weirdness of that night, things could have gone horribly wrong. I'm glad all I got out of that night was a story. Out of gas, I grew up in an extremely rural Midwestern state. My family lived in the country between 2 small towns. I had attended school in both small towns and knew most of the families in the area either by face or last name. One night it was about 10 or 11 and I was leaving a high school basketball game in Town A. I was around 15 and driving on my school permit past curfew. I had borrowed my uncle's car, an early 90s Toyota with a leak in the gas tank that caused me to run out of gas before I made it more than 5 or 6 miles out of town, and I had about 7 left to go. I was on a long stretch of road that served as a shortcut between 2 main highways in the aforementioned towns and wasn't heavily traveled. There were a few houses, but they were stretched far apart, and at the time, as well as to this day, cell phone reception was very spotty. I waited a while and finally a nice, newer red truck with an extended cab, a toolbox in the back, and a construction company logo on the side pulled up. It was a Friday or Saturday night, and there was a man inside with a woman and 2 girls. He offered me his phone. I remember noticing it was a track phone, which my friends and I at the time referred to as crack phones because you can't trace the owners and they are frequently used by drug addicts. They're also used a lot by people who can't afford a standard phone plan, but the family was driving a really nice vehicle and they seemed super clean cut. So it struck me as odd. The phone got no reception. I tried calling my parents a few times and finally gave up. The truck had been headed away from Town B towards Town A, where I had just come from, so when they offered me a ride I thought nothing of it. I had a gas can in the trunk and all of my friends lived in Town A, so I figured they could drop me off at the gas station on the way to their destination and I could find a ride back with somebody I knew. When I got in the car I was caught off guard by the way the woman, who I assumed was his wife, and the 2 girls, who I assumed were their children, were dressed. Conservative families, even Amish and Mennonites, aren't uncommon where I'm from. But for the men being otherwise modern, wearing jeans, driving a sort of flashy truck, and owning a cell phone, the females' clothing surprised me. They all wore long heavy skirts with button-up blouses and thin bonnets on their heads. One of the girls seemed to have a disability and made grunting noises every so often. Other than her noises, the women were completely silent. Everything seemed fine to me until the man driving turned around and started driving the opposite way of the direction he had been driving. The closest town the other way was still 15 or more miles, and it seemed out of his way. Out of politeness I reminded him that I had come from Town A, knew everyone there, and could find a ride home. It was late and I figured he needed to get his family where they were going. That's when he told me that he was from Town B and that he had a full gas can waiting at his house, and that he would take me there and bring me back to my car to fill it up. Still trying to be polite, I told him it was unnecessary, and my house was on the way to Town B, just a few miles away, and he could drop me off there. He didn't reply. I started to feel like something was off. I'm from an area where people go out of their way to help others, but it seemed like too much. I had insisted numerous times that he didn't have to drive nearly 30 miles out of his way to get me gas. He could simply drop me off on his way to his destination, or if he wanted to make sure I made it home fine, he could drop me off at home. In my uneasiness, I started making small talk. I asked him his name, and his last name was unfamiliar to me, which was surprising, but not totally unbelievable, coming from a town of around 3,000 people where I had spent the first decade of my life, and where both of my parents still worked. I remember wishing that I had paid attention to the construction company name on the side of the truck, since most companies in my area were named after a family. As we got closer to the turnoff to my house, I started to get more frantic. I realized that these people, who didn't even seem overly friendly, were insisting that we drive completely out of the way, late at night, in a rural community, to fix a fairly commonplace mishap. I had no idea who they were. I had never seen them before. I had no cell phone reception, and their cell phone was undetectable. Even if it wasn't what they were trying to do, making me disappear would be a pretty easy task. I started kind of shrieking that they just dropped me off at my house, but nobody in the car seemed like they heard me. Finally, in a fit of panic, I screamed at the top of my voice, "This is my turn. Take me home. Please take me home right now." Finally, for the first time, the wife spoke up, yelling at the men angrily and somewhat annoyed, "Just fucking take her home." Outside of the girl's grunting, the car fell silent. He swerved angrily onto my road, pulled into my driveway, let me out, and then reversed out of the driveway so fast that the tires spit gravel and I couldn't even see the license plate or the name of company through the dust. I ran inside and woke up my parents to tell them what happened. They just yelled at me because I was driving past curfew. I don't know for sure what the intentions were, and maybe they just wanted to help, but I felt really uneasy the whole time. Not as scary as some stuff on here, but that's my experience.